Okay, folks, we are back live. We'll be commencing our next presentation shortly. I hope you got away for a bit of a break. I was disappointed to learn that someone had substituted out my Cheetos for these nutritious carrots. But onwards with the show. Our next presenter is Gilles Valade. Gilles has been the ED of Avalanche Canada for the past 7 years. And there he is, ready to go. And he's going to give us a bit of a look at their year in review. Gilles, do we have audio from you?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Your presentation is up, and if you hit presentation mode, you're ready to go.
Okay, like this.
You look great, and it's all yours, Gilles.
Thanks, Joe. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for being here, and thanks to the CAA for pulling this off, and for Brent for thanks to Brent for dealing with all the IT variability in terms of our expertise. Not too long ago, I remember having conversations with Joe and Kristen on what would happen or not in Penticton. So obviously that's ancient history now. But thanks for pulling this off. Just want to spend a few minutes giving our usual annual AvCan update here. It was an interesting year, as you probably aware. But first off, I'd like to thank obviously the professional community again for the data they provide to the InfoX system. Obviously, this is critical for us, for our forecasts and for our communications. It's a great source, a great tool. So, what else can I say? We can do what we do without it. So thanks again. Also, thanks to our friends at Environment Canada. Another group of people that we rely on a lot is the forecasters, the weather forecasters that we're in constant communications with. And thank you to them. And they also produce our mountain weather forecast, which is our second most popular product on our website. And this year they've expanded to the eastern mountain ranges. So that was very good. We lots of positive feedback. So what happened last year? Well, quite a few things. Finally, after over a year since the announcement of Finance Minister Morneau, we've concluded, the exchange of funds basically with the federal government. It was a 3-year project that we worked on with Avalanche Quebec. And I think last year when I spoke in Penticton, we were still waiting for final signing, etc. So in July, we finally got the money, $25 million. And when we say we, there's no me in we. So the money was all the check went to the Avalanche Canada Foundation, and they house and they manage the funds on our behalf and on the behalf of the federal government. This is a one-time endowment, and it comes with quite a few conditions. And first and foremost, our investment restrictions. So when we were given the funds, we were told that not told, it was basically guidelines and in the contract that we could only invest the funds in very secure vehicles like T-bills and bonds, which basically reduced the income that endowment would generate. And we basically are planning with a 1.3% return on investment. So last year when the markets were booming and everybody was turning in 15-20% returns, we were quite disappointed with 1.3. A year later, after what we've seen happen in the last couple of months, we're still getting 1.3 and maybe a little bit more. And so we're very thankful at this point for the investment restrictions. And we would be losing probably 10 percentage points instead of making some revenue. So in hindsight, that was a very good very good guidelines. This endowment is part of a 15-year business plan that was approved by the federal government. So it's a long-term investment. It includes the whole country. It includes Avalanche Quebec in there. And the whole premise around this endowment is that it would partially fund the next 15 years in collaboration with the provincial governments. which has been somewhat unsuccessful. So we're still dealing with the provincial governments. I'll talk about that in a few seconds a little bit more. The other main condition is that this funding needs to last for 10 years minimum. So we can't just do whatever we want with the money. We need to make it last for 10 years. Every year we need to submit a business plan to the federal government that needs to be approved by the minister and the minister's office. So like I said, it's not like we can just do what we want with the money. Part of our I'd say priorities was to expand our programs in regions that were not well served by our products, and so we've been working on this for years, but without enough funding, we couldn't expand. But last year we were able to. So North Rockies and the Yukon got field teams and regular forecasts. In the North Rockies, it was the first time that they got a regular forecast. We've been working up there for years and years trying to produce products and services useful for the users. So we're happy to have done that this year, and it was lots of efforts to get that going. And also, we got a field team back in Yukon. 10 years ago, we had a field team up there that was funded by a grant from the federal government under the Search and Rescue New Initiative Fund. When the money ran out, we weren't able to secure other funding to replace it. So unfortunately, that program ceased to exist. And we've tried over the years to get things going. We had a partial field team up there for the last couple of years, but this year finally we had full field team. So again, thanks for everyone that worked on this. And if you notice, both our field teams here are outfitted with FXR gear, which is one of our sponsors. So thanks a lot. Makes us look good. In the fall of 2018, we produced our brand new Avalanche Skills Training handbook to go with our Avalanche Skills Training course program. And it was a ski version. So last year, over the year and the summer, we worked on our snowmobile version, which we got out in time for the winter season. So it was well received, and lots of folks worked on this, including our own James Floyer and Curtis Polyak, who's also one of our board members, and Keith Robine, who's been quite involved with all versions of our Avalanche Skills Training handbook. Thanks to those people, and thanks to Nancy Geismar. If you know Nancy, she's been working behind the scenes to make those things happen. We've also translated the original or the first manual, which was the ski manual last year, and the primary users of the French version are Avalanche Quebec, and they've basically been translating that manual, and that came out again in time for the fall season last year. And we also are working right now on the snowmobile version of the French version, which hopefully will be ready for this fall. We're also working quite hard on making our products and services available in both official languages. Obviously, with Avalanche Quebec, quite a lot of that information is available in French. But this year at Avalanche Canada, all our press releases, avalanche warnings, special messaging, even COVID-related, were all done in both official languages. And we're working in the future to have 100% of everything that we produce available in both official languages. That'll take a few years, but we're working on it. This year also saw unprecedented sort of events. Newfoundland had what we can say biblical level snowstorm in mid-January. The city of St. John even declared a state of emergency. They evacuated a neighborhood, the Battery, and because of avalanches actually that had occurred, and also because of potential other avalanches. And so we worked with we have a small team in Newfoundland, and worked with them for outreach messaging on urban areas and staying away from steep slopes, et cetera, et cetera. And we've also been working in Newfoundland, as you know, or might know, the recreational usage in Newfoundland is growing exponentially, like everywhere else, and probably a little bit behind there, but now they're certainly seeing a huge increase. And so we rated a mountain range in Western Newfoundland, 8th rating, the long range, and then that'll be available on our trip planner. And we're also working on building capacity for outreach and training in Newfoundland. So that'll be ongoing. We've also put a lot of effort into snowshoers. So this year, a big push on our outreach efforts. Our early season outreach, especially on the coast, Vancouver, North Vancouver, we did quite a few snowshoeing and unawares events. For lack of a better word, we call it unawares for the people that are new to the backcountry and don't really understand that there's an avalanche danger or hazard when they venture out. Mostly these are active hikers that use the same trails in the wintertime on snowshoes, but we know the conditions are completely different. So that's what we're focusing on. And it happens that many of those are new Canadians, and also English is their second language. So we've been producing information in quite a few languages for them. We've also launched a new landing page on our website called Fresh to the Backcountry, and it's basically very basic information for those that need to understand what to look for terrain and conditions, and to actually understand that there is an avalanche hazard, and at least to know that it exists, and go from there. Also, this year we launched our new forecasting software, so Avid. We've been working on this for quite a few years. This is a 3-year project that's funded by the federal government, another Search and Rescue New Initiative Fund grant. This fall was the first time that our forecasters and also Kananaskis country forecasters used Avid, and from what we know and hear is that it's been well received. It's quite intuitive, and it's been a bit of a time saver for our forecasters. And we're continuing to work on the project. We're in talks with Parks Canada, with the Colorado Avalanche Center, and other partners, the CAA also, in how to move this forward, because there's lots to be done. Part of the project also was to look at better understand how our users use the forecast, and also how our forecasters use the information, how they aggregate the information to produce forecasts. And that was done in collaboration with Pascal's team at Simon Fraser. So you probably saw a few presentations this morning that relate to some of this work. And if you see in the photo over here, we were very proactive. Months before COVID, we had hand sanitizer readily available, but we didn't know at that point it was a great idea. That's Grant, by the way, probably he knew that. Obviously, can't talk about Avalanche Canada without talking about funding. Some good news, some not so good news. In the last 2 years, we've been successful in obtaining capital grants from BC Gaming, and we've used those to buy vehicles. So we bought some pickup trucks and some trailers, and at the early last summer, and then later this year, or just before our winter season, we were able to buy snowmobiles and safety equipment for our field teams. So thanks to BC Gaming, it's always great to get this kind of funding, especially grants. On the I'd say the less positive side is as mentioned before, the federal grant that we have, the endowment, is based on the premise that the rest of the funding for the 15 years, because we're talking about a 15-year, $85 million business plan that we produced for the federal government, and so we got 25 million from the federal government. The rest over the 10 years is to come from various provinces where we operate. So Yukon, BC, Alberta, Quebec, and Newfoundland. I'd say that so far hasn't been very successful, especially for British Columbia. In terms of funding, they are probably the least generous in comparison to the size and scope of avalanche problem in Canada. So 75% is BC, and also in terms of where our activities are, which is mostly BC. I just doing numbers this morning in comparison to the Yukon, which is Yukon gives us less money than the BC government, but it still represents about 24 times more money in comparison to the problem and the size of the province and population. So we've been working with the Minister of Public Safety, Minister Farnworth, and in May last year in the legislature, he committed to increasing our funding to $1 million a year, and which was great news because that was part of our business plan with the federal government. Unfortunately, other than discussions, so far hasn't produced anything. Still with British Columbia, it's an annual ask. There is nothing in writing, no multi-year agreement, and part of our funding is an annual application for a gaming grant, which we hope will be successful again this year. 3 years ago, they gave us a small grant also that we were to spend over 3 years, and that's been spent, and so that grant is over. Also, Alberta, in their fall budget, reduced their funding. Obviously, very challenging times in Alberta, so we're thankful that we're still receiving funding, but it is less. In Quebec, Dominic, would tell you that they're having challenges also with their provincial government and following up on the commitments that they had made before we got the federal funding. And then, as we suspected, once we got the federal funding, it was an invitation for some of our funders to leave and basically say, we don't need to fund you anymore. You've got the federal grant. We knew that was going to happen, but it was never meant as replacement funding. So it's not to replace the funding that we might lose. So, and because of the conditions, we can't just spend more, even though the money is there, because it needs to last for 10 years, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll see where this goes. And, third but not the least is our sponsorships were, I'd say the trend was getting less and less sponsorship funding every year, sponsorship fatigue, etc. And this year, with the impact of COVID, we know that our sponsorship funding will go down quite a bit, and we're expecting much of it not to come back after. And so far for next year, we're looking at about of confirmed lost funding about $550,000 so far, and there's still a few big sponsors, including our largest corporate sponsor, who might or might not return next year. So it's luckily we have the federal endowment that we can that can take us through hard times for the future, but it can't do everything. So a lot of our expansion plans, for example, going to Vancouver Island and adding a second field team to the North Rockies, because of the size of the region, we need at least 2 field teams. That won't happen until we get more provincial funding, and hopefully that'll come through at some point. But given the conditions now, it's going to be quite challenging. You might have heard of this, COVID. Like everyone else, this came as a surprise, and initially, early March was business as usual. There was nothing to worry about yet, and like most people here, on a daily basis, we had to revise our plans. And by mid-March, we had issued some messaging to ask people to be conservative in the backcountry and not to impact health services, emergency services, and because they were going to be needed for COVID response, etc. And shortly thereafter, we made the decision to stop forecasting. So by the end of March, March 30th was our last day of forecasts. We had been in discussion with our other forecasting partners across the country. Quebec was the first entity to cease forecasting. And then after we stopped our forecasting, Parks Canada and Kananaskis Country followed suit, and shortly thereafter, there was not one forecast in Canada. So our response was quite unified in terms of the country. The decision was made you know, I'd say as a collaboration. And so as a country, we came together and made that decision, for better or worse. What we don't know is the impact of COVID for next season. We know it's not going to be business as usual, so we're preparing for our outreach not to be the same as what we've done in the past. So we're designing, building online tools, webinars, and other strategies to reach as many people as we can without being in person and respecting social distancing guidelines, etc. And one of the more unknowns is our data stream. As mentioned earlier, we depend on InfoX and the information we get from that resource for our products, mostly forecasting. So if there are less commercial operations and less professional data next year, how much that will impact our services and our products is still to be known. So we're sort of preparing and planning for this as much as we can. And before I thank our government partners, I need to thank Avalanche Canada staff. Couldn't do any of this without all of them. It's all because of their dedication, and that we are able to produce what we produce every year. So thanks very much. Obviously, we have lots of funders still. So our government partners, you can see here. We have also program partners and some sponsors and more sponsors. And that's it for me. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thanks, Gilles. Thanks for that presentation. Obviously, a lot of us are thinking of the challenges you face and others face as well. While our questionnaires get queued up, I have a warm-up question for you that I think you should be able to field. You're Avalanche Canada, we're the Canadian Avalanche Association. A lot of folks on the call know the difference, but how many times a day do you get asked what the difference is?
It's actually better than it was. Not too often these days. But when I do get asked, it's always surprising who asks the question. But I won't name anyone.
Oh, okay, well, that was the easy one. You may have a few harder ones from the audience. Brent, do you see any questions from the floor?
We currently have no questions from the floor, Joe. Oh, just wait. We got Sean Zimmerman Wall. Just put his hands up. Sean, you're up.
Yeah, good afternoon, Gilles and Joe and everybody else in attendance. This is Sean Zimmerman Wall down from the States. My question is about what kind of support or guidelines might you be thinking of for your AST providers and how they may be able to respond to field courses next season?
That's a good question. We had our last week our annual AST meeting with providers, and so we're in the process of we just started a survey, but we're looking at developing I'd say parameters, guidelines, and tools for online delivery of part of the course and the theory part of AST courses. And so either as a add-on or part of the theory classroom part, and we're not trying to replace the whole thing because we still think that it's a better product when it's face-to-face. But the reality is things are changing even without COVID. So we're looking at blended learning options for the AST program. I think the difficult part is going to be backcountry closures. So if we have closures and they can't access terrain, then that'll be quite a bit harder because the field component needs to be done in the field. But certainly we're working with AST providers to work on tools and to help them next year.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Great. Thanks, Sean. Brent, is there anyone else? I don't see anyone. Oh, looks like one.
We have one more from Steve. Steve Kite.
Hi, Gilles. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Steve.
Okay. As a British Columbia resident, I'm fairly disappointed to hear that our BC government isn't really pulling its weight. I know how much time you guys spend working in BC compared to the rest of the provinces. Is there anything that you could say? Well, there's 300 or 400 people on this conference. Is there anything that you could tell us that we could do to help push that through, like talking to our MLAs or anything like that? Is there anything that you would have that we can do to help?
Yeah, of course. I think talking to our MLAs, I think, you know, we're probably going to, I'd say, probably escalate is too strong of a word, but we're going to engage the government more, and at some point we will ask our stakeholders, our friends, and our users to support I'd say, our push to get our provincial government to do what it should do and what it committed to doing. It's not like they're not recognizing there's a need. They actually confirmed that they were going to get us more funding. So it's just following through. But yeah, I think that we might ask for your support.
Okay, I'll be there.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Gilles. I think many of the other folks on the call will also be there. Right now, Brent, I don't see any more questions unless you do.
I believe we have no more questions from the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Gilles, and we'll continue to watch the situation as it evolves.
Great. Thanks. Have a good day.
Thanks. Okay, thanks everyone. We will take a micro break. It is 3 minutes to the hour. We'll post the info you see there, and we'll be back at exactly noon Pacific and whatever the top of the hour is your time.